Before you today is the opening salvo of a now over 2-decade-long civil war between the two German luxury superpowers. Over the years, many blows have been traded back and forth between the M Performance division at BMW and AMG tuning with Mercedes. But this is where it all began, and it's amazing how evenly matched these cars were and how differently they've aged in terms of durability and desirability. Obviously, I have just a little bias towards Mercedes, but I will do my best to remain objective. Now, I'll start with the BMW, that's the Mercedes. Now, I'll start with the BMW, which is the newest addition to my hoopty fleet. It's a 1998 with the dreaded automatic transmission and the least desirable convertible model. The M3 had sedan and coupe variants as well, and of course was also offered with a fantastic manual gearbox. BMW's in-house production division was already well established by this time, with several production cars already under its belt from previous decades. And this was their second generation of M3, so they really had the experience and resources to make a truly great performance car. The C36 was built when AMG was still an independent tuning company from Mercedes, but in 1995 they formed a partnership to create AMG's first full production car to be sold in Mercedes showrooms throughout the world. So complete C280s were being trucked over to AMG for extensive modifications done mostly by hand. Production numbers were low and they were only offered in an automatic transmission with very few other added options. This car, which I picked up for a little over $5,000, really is Genesis, the start of the performance arm that Mercedes sorely needed. Both engines really have similar stories. Both are inline sixes that were bored out, had their stroke increased, and had their top end hopped up. Mercedes wins on the power side with its larger displacement 3.6-liter engine, putting out 268 horsepower, while the M3 only has 245 horsepower for the choked down American version. Remember, this is the 90s, and this kind of power level was actually making the M3 and the C36 among the quickest sedans in production at the time. With an automatic, the AMG was half a second quicker than the M3 0 to 60, but the manual transmission equipped Beamer has a slight advantage. Both engines really do have an amazing sound too, and I can't figure out which one's better, so I'll just let you decide. Where this M3 really begins to clobber the C36 is in the handling department. Having the R&D experience as well as a more sporty tuned chassis to begin with really shows with the M3. An old Car and Driver article back in the day reported this BMW was up there in the slalom course performance numbers with a Ferrari 355, Porsche 911 Turbo, and the Viper. The C36 is still a decent handler, but was derived from a car that was built for comfort, and I think they were too nervous to make the C36 feel too harsh in an effort for better handling. Also, the M3 definitely has better sports seats and a more cockpit-like interior. It was also way cheaper new, enough to make the C36 feel like a joke. You could buy this M3 as a sedan with a starting price of $39,000, while the C36 was $57,000, nearly $20,000 more for a car that had very little to offer over an M3. It's no wonder why they sold so few AMGs in the beginning, but as the years passed and these two cars changed hands from their second, third, and fourth owners and crossed over 100,000 miles, it became pretty obvious how much better built of a car you got with the Mercedes. 20 years and 152,000 miles later, the interior of this BMW is falling apart. The leather seats in the lower model BMWs of this era all turned to cardboard, and the door panels begin cracking and falling apart. And the pixels in the LCD screens throughout the car begin dying. The poor quality interior materials might have been forgivable if the rest of the car wasn't a mechanical basket case as well. This excellent handling suspension turned out to be pretty delicate, and they really drive like garbage when all their rubber bits prematurely wear out. You've also got transmission issues with the automatics, a cooling system that turns to glass, and all the electrical things that endlessly break. And then there's the engine that likes to loosen its own nut on the oil pump sprocket and grenade the engine. And the variable valve timing, that is a constant bother. The check engine light is just a constant fixture with any old BMW. Meanwhile, the Mercedes still shines with its bank vault-like construction and high-quality materials. Despite this car having 212,000 miles, the interior still looks nearly new. And this isn't an isolated example. The leather in Mercedes just holds up better, along with all the other components, which shouldn't be a surprise since Mercedes of this era are known for taking abuse and age very gracefully. Now, I'm not delusional, and I know this isn't a totally maintenance-free car, as it did have this stupid biodegradable wiring harness in 1995, and the head gaskets were known for springing oil leaks in the corners. But you can tell the AMG was much, much better built than the BMW. So while the Mercedes isn't a better performer, you're much less likely to find yourself on the side of the road with a surprise failure. The C36 is also much more comfortable and feels more modern. And since new performance cars are light years ahead of the M3 and this car anyway, it makes sense to own one that feels better overall. But clearly, most people disagree with me on this. Despite the rarity of the C36 AMG, it's not a very sought-after car today, and even in car enthusiast circles, it's been mostly forgotten. I find myself constantly having to explain to people why this car is so cool, while the M3 really needs no introduction. Even though BMW sold a ton of M3s, most have fallen to pieces by now due to their questionable quality and questionable owners, making nice examples pretty scarce. And there's still a huge enthusiast following for the BMW. A nice lower mileage M3 of this era with a manual transmission is trading in the mid-teens to almost $20,000, while a comparable C36 would go for about half that. And that's despite there's only a handful of these for sale at a time. So I really hate to admit it, but the BMW, despite its questionable build quality and durability, is the better car to buy from an investment standpoint and from a miles per gallon standpoint, and just for that cool factor. The C36 is just a footnote in car history, while the M3 is a legend. And I might feel a little less bitter about this if you hit the like button for me. And as always, thank you for watching.